Chapter 6. Cultural Management for Ornamental Plants. Learning Objectives. After study of the material in this chapter, you should be able to 1. Explain the use of the USDA plant hardiness zone ratings. 2. List 4 site conditions that might contribute to plant stress. 3. Describe how to plant a container-grown shrub to maximize root growth. 4. List 4 reasons to use mulch around landscape plants. 5. Identify 2 pest problems that might be treated by pruning. Terms to know. Hardiness zones. Microclimate. Chapter 6. Cultural Management for Ornamental Plants. Landscapes usually have a variety of ornamental plantings. These include flowers and woody ornamentals, which may be ground covers, vines, shrubs, and trees. In general, shrubs are woody plants with one or more stems that grow to a height of 15 feet or less with foliage extending to the ground. Trees typically grow more than 15 feet tall and usually have only one main trunk. Cultural management for ornamental plants involves many common-sense ways to grow healthy plants. For detailed information regarding ornamental plant selection and care, see the Resources section at the end of this chapter. Match the plant and the site. As you select plants for the landscape, it is important to match the plant's needs with the site conditions. Factors to consider include cold hardiness, heat tolerance, light requirement, soil characteristics, and pest susceptibility. Hardiness. The primary guide to determining plant hardiness is the USDA Hardiness Zone Map. Hardiness zones are based on average minimum temperatures. A plant is said to be hardy if it can tolerate the lowest average winter temperatures that usually occur in a zone. When trying to determine why a particular plant is failing, make sure that it is adapted to the site in the first place. Outside their hardiness zones, plants will be under stress that will make them more susceptible to pests. Information about plant heat tolerance is harder to obtain. Spruce, white pine, and lilac often perform poorly in the Piedmont and coastal plain regions because of the stress caused by long, hot summers. The warm night temperatures in the south also increase plant respiration and deplete food reserves. The American Horticultural Society has developed a plant heat zone map that includes 12 zones based on the number of days that temperature rises above 86 degrees Fahrenheit. You can accurately predict which plant varieties will thrive in an area by consulting the USDA Hardiness Zone Map and the Heat Zone Map. Microclimates. In addition to the regional climate, plants are affected by the microclimate conditions in their immediate vicinity. The north side of a building will have colder but more constant temperatures than the south side. The microclimate under a tree canopy can be several degrees warmer in the winter than that in an open area and can be several degrees cooler in the summer. Plants under a building's eaves may receive almost no rain, while plants near a roof without gutters may receive several hundred inches of rainfall per year. Rocks, paved surfaces, and brick walls will re-radiate heat at night and keep nearby plants warmer. Sunlight shade. Plants vary in the amount of light they require. Before choosing plants for a landscape, observe how many hours of sun and shade a specific site receives during the day. Plants requiring full sun need at least 6 hours of direct sun. Many shade-loving plants can tolerate exposure to early morning sun, but putting heat-loving plants in light shade will delay and reduce their flower production. Pest problems can be caused by placing a plant in a site that does not provide adequate sun. For example, roses growing in shade are likely to develop black spot disease. Light, temperature, and water are closely interrelated. Woody plants listed as preferring partial shade may tolerate more sun if temperatures are moderate and adequate water and mulch are provided. Soil moisture and drainage. Frequent, heavy rains in combination with poorly drained soils will cause saturation, excessive soil moisture and limited air space in the soil, thus reducing plant growth and increasing the chances of root rot problems. While most plants need to dry out slightly between waterings, they cannot tolerate standing water or drought for extended periods of time. Many hollies, azaleas, dogwoods, and junipers die because the soil has poor internal drainage and insufficient oxygen. Clay soils are more prone to poor drainage because they tend to hold more water and drain more slowly than sandy soils. For poorly drained sites, select plants that are tolerant of wet conditions or improve drainage with raised beds or drainage tile. Add organic matter, such as pine bark or compost, to improve aeration, water movement, and drainage. Check the planting site for good drainage. 1. Dig a hole 10 inches deep and fill it with water. 2. After it drains, refill it with water. 3. If this water drains in 8 to 10 hours, the site drains well enough for most plants. Soil pH. If soil test results indicate that nutrient or pH adjustments are needed for annual plants, the materials should be mixed into the soil uniformly because bedding plants have very shallow root systems. The soil pH for bedding plants should be between 5.5 and 6.5. Most woody plants will grow in soil with a pH range between 6.0 and 7.0. Plants such as Japanese pyrus, azalea, blueberry, camellia, mountain laurel, and rhododendron grow best in soil with a pH of 5.0 to 5.5. If lime is needed, incorporate it into the soil before planting. Lime applied on the soil surface moves slowly, about 1 inch per year. Lime can be applied any month, but winter application is recommended. Adjust pH to meet plant needs. To raise pH, apply lime. To reduce pH, apply sulfur, iron sulfate, or aluminum sulfate. Pest susceptibility. Some plants are very susceptible to insect and disease problems. Red tip photinia has a high probability of developing entomosporium leaf spot disease. Japanese euonymus is likely to have problems with scale insects. Selection of plants that are less susceptible may reduce problems, but it will probably not eliminate them altogether. Remember that cultivars of a specific plant will vary in their susceptibility to a specific disease. Inspect plants. Make a serious effort to purchase only pest-free plants and always inspect transplants for diseases, insects, and weeds before putting them into a landscape. It is especially important to inspect the roots. Roots should be firm and straight. Avoid plants that have kinks in the major roots or that have roots encircling the pot. When selecting annual plants, do not buy plants that have been neglected or stored under stressful conditions, such as displays on hot, paved surfaces, for extended periods. Starting with bedding plants. Choose plants with compact foliage, side branches, and good color. It may be tempting to select plants already in bloom, but younger, non-flowering plants are often the best choice because they establish more quickly in the landscape. Place the plants outdoors in a partially shaded location until they can be planted. The small amount of soil in the containers will dry out quickly, so check the plants daily and provide water as needed. Fertilizing. A soil test is the only way to determine whether phosphorus, potassium, calcium, or magnesium is needed or whether pH is in the right range for the plant selected. Application of too much fertilizer or unneeded fertilizer could result in salt injury to plants or cause nutrient imbalances. It is also environmentally unsound. If a soil test is not made, incorporate 2 to 3 pounds of 10-10-10 fertilizer per 100 square feet of bed area. An alternative to 10-10-10 is a slow-release fertilizer such as 16-4-8 or 12-4-8. Dolomitic limestone can be used to raise pH and to supply needed magnesium. During the growing season, make decisions about additional fertilizer applications by checking for adequate growth rate and healthy leaf color. Nitrogen can be applied in 2 forms: 1. In a quick release, water-soluble form using a liquid or granular fertilizer. If a quick-release fertilizer such as 10-10-10 is used, apply 1 pound per 100 square feet every 4 to 8 weeks throughout the season. 2. In a slow-release, granular form. Make only 2 applications, one incorporated into the bed just before planting and the second broadcast over the bed midway through the growing season. Do not exceed 4 to 6 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. Transplanting. Plants in cell packs or containers should be watered thoroughly and allowed to drain before removing them from the container. A damp root ball is less likely to fall apart. Do not pull plants from the container. Set the plants at the same depth or just slightly deeper than they were growing in the container. When filling the hole, firm the soil lightly and water thoroughly. Space plants so they will fill in but not be crowded. Crowding increases the likelihood of disease development. A good rule of thumb is to space plants 6 to 8 inches apart. Mulch transplants after planting with a 2 to 3 inch layer of material such as pine bark mulch or compost. Apply only 1/2 inch of mulch at the base of the plant. Excessive mulching at the plant base can cause disease problems. How to plant trees and shrubs. The proper installation of plants in the landscape involves much more than just digging holes and setting plants in them. The existing soil is often compacted and poorly drained. Tilling or digging to improve aeration and drainage is essential for satisfactory plant growth. Preparing an entire bed instead of preparing individual holes will give roots a larger area to grow into before they encounter native soil. To achieve a 25% increase in organic matter, incorporate 3 inches of organic matter, such as pine bark mulch, nut nuggets, or compost, into the top 12 inches of soil. Use organic matter that has been composted or aged. Incorporating uncomposted organic matter can create nutrient deficiency problems. Adding organic matter when preparing individual holes is not recommended. The planting depth should keep the plant at the same depth after transplanting as it was in the container. Make the sides of the hole rough and irregular. Planting in poorly drained sites. When planting in poorly drained or severely compacted sites, set the plant so the root ball is partially above the soil level. Dig the hole only 2/3 the depth of the root ball and mound soil around the root ball to create a gentle slope. The mound should be 5 times wider than the root ball. A disadvantage with this method of planting is that the top of the root ball may dry out quickly during dry weather. Container-grown plants. Growing plants in containers has become the most popular method of growing plants for sale by the nursery industry. Late fall and early spring are considered ideal planting times because roots will have more time to grow into the surrounding soil before the stress due to new foliage growth and high temperatures occurs. Always water plants thoroughly before transplanting. Remove the plant from the container by turning the plant upside down and giving the top edge of the container a sharp rap. Catch the root ball in your hands as it slips from the container. After the roots have been loosened or cut, carefully place the plant in the hole. Always pick the plant up by the root ball, never by the trunk or stem. If a soil test indicates that lime is needed, mix it with the backfill. Fertilizer should not be added at planting because it can burn the roots. An exception would be the application of phosphorus, which moves very slowly, or not at all, in the soil and plays a key role in root formation. It will not burn the roots. After a tree or shrub has been planted, construct a ring of soil 2 to 3 inches high at the outside edge of the hole to form a water basin. This prevents water from running off the surface. The water basin can be removed after the plants become established. Plants in beds probably will not require a water basin. Balled and burlapped plants. Balled and burlapped, band bee plants have been grown in field nursery rows, dug with the soil intact, wrapped with burlap, and tied with twine. They transplant best during late fall and early winter, but can be successfully moved in the spring. The planting procedure is essentially the same as for container-grown plants. Handle band bee material carefully. When selecting a band bee plant, be sure the ball is sound and has not been broken. Always pick the plant up by the soil ball, never by the trunk or stem. Be sure the soil ball does not dry out or get exposed to hot summer or freezing winter temperatures for an extended time before planting. Unless it is a synthetic material or has been treated with a chemical preservative, leave the burlap on the root ball. Tan-colored, untreated, natural burlap is biodegradable. Synthetic material will melt rather than burn when tested with a match. The burlap on top of the root ball should be cut, rolled back, and covered with soil. If part of the burlap remains exposed above the soil line, it will act as a wick that draws moisture from the root ball. After positioning the plant in the hole, remove any straps, ties, or strings from around the root ball. Wire baskets are often used to reinforce the root ball during shipping. Removing the entire wire basket may damage the root ball. It might be safer to cut and remove the top portion of the basket. Band B plants usually need little pruning at planting, but will need careful watering during dry weather. Care of newly installed plants. Watering. Until their roots grow into the surrounding soil, recently installed plants are subject to drought stress from 1. Loss of roots in the transplanting process, and 2. Differences in soil texture between the root ball and the surrounding soil that restrict water movement. If the root ball is dry, increase the amount and/or the frequency of watering. Do not let the transplanted root ball dry out, because once the organic mix of container-grown plants gets dry, it is very difficult to re-wet. Pruning. Container-grown plants require only the removal of broken and damaged branches. Band B plants may require light pruning if the root system was drastically reduced during digging. Prune by removing entire small branches rather than cutting back the tips of many branches. Do not remove the lower branches of transplanted trees that will provide shade for the trunk and produce food for the tree. Fertilizing. You should have the soil tested before planting and every 2 to 3 years thereafter. For fall-planted trees and shrubs, wait until spring to fertilize. For spring-planted plants, wait 6 to 8 weeks to fertilize. Apply a slow-release fertilizer in a light band along the perimeter of the planting hole. Remember that newly installed plants are under stress and should receive only a light application of fertilizer. Tree wraps. The benefits of tree wraps are unclear. They may provide some protection from cracking of newly transplanted, thin-barked trees if direct sun shines on the trunk. Tree wraps are normally applied in the fall and removed the following spring. If left on too long, they can encourage insect and disease problems. Care of established trees and shrubs. Symptoms of poor growth may be caused by inadequate soil aeration, excessive moisture, adverse climatic conditions, incorrect pH, or disease. Recently transplanted ornamentals often will not resume a normal growth rate until the original root system is re-established. Fertilizing. Trees and shrubs in the landscape do not necessarily need fertilizer every year. A moderate rate of growth and good, green color is desired for most woody plants. Excessive vigor, which is evident by lush green leaves and long shoot growth, is often undesirable. Such plants are more susceptible to injury by cold in winter, are more likely to be broken during wind and ice storms, and usually require more pruning than plants making moderate growth. All too often landscapers assume that if a plant is not doing well they should fertilize to correct the situation. Fertilization may be helpful, but only after the problem causing poor growth has been corrected. Fertilizer rate. Fertilization rates should be based on soil test results, current and desired growth rate, plant age and type, location, or general guidelines. The rate should also be influenced by rainfall and soil type. A wet season will normally increase the need to fertilize, especially in sandy soils. During periods of dry weather, reduce the amount of fertilizer. Fertilizer encourages water-demanding new growth and can injure roots of ornamentals under drought stress. Plants growing in a restricted root zone will need less nitrogen. Plants with a fibrous root system, such as azalea, rhododendron, and blueberry, are very easily damaged by fertilizer. Light applications are recommended. Plant roots normally grow 3 times as far as their branches. Ornamentals located near a lawn that is fertilized regularly may not need additional fertilizer because many of their roots extend into the lawn area where they will absorb nutrients. Time and method of application. Fertilize trees and shrubs in early spring or fall. Spring fertilizer application should be made before new growth starts. Fall fertilizer applications should be made approximately 1 month after the first killing frost. Do not apply fertilizer after mid-August because it may stimulate late growth that will not harden off before frost. The fertilizer should be spread evenly over the entire root zone, which can extend 2 to 3 times the width of the branches. Sprinkle the fertilizer on top of the soil or mulch and water lightly. Because the fertilizer will quickly move through the mulch, there is no need to remove the mulch or to place the fertilizer below it. Do not use weed and feed lawn fertilizer herbicide combinations under trees or shrubs unless the label indicates that it is safe. Some plants, such as dogwoods, are very sensitive to the dicamba herbicide that is contained in many weed and feed lawn fertilizers. Mulch. Mulches generally reduce stress on ornamental plants. Mulch conserves moisture, maintains uniform soil temperatures, prevents most weed seeds from germinating, and improves the appearance of landscape plantings. Organic mulches such as compost and shredded bark contribute to plant nutrition when the mulch decomposes into humus and releases nutrients. Keep organic mulch several inches away from trunks to help prevent crown rot diseases and vole feeding. A 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch, after settling, is adequate to prevent most weed seeds from germinating and will allow air and water to penetrate the soil below. For maximum benefit, the mulched area should be extended to include as much of the root zone as possible. Mulch can be applied any time of the year, although the best time is late spring after the soil has warmed. Early spring application will delay soil warming and possibly plant growth. Mulching materials. Some of the best mulching materials include pine bark nuggets, pine straw, and compost. On slopes, pine straw will remain in place better than most other materials. Geotextiles and landscape fabrics are available for use as mulch. These materials will prevent the growth of most weeds, sedges and some grasses will grow through them, and will allow a normal water and oxygen exchange. Fasten the material to the bare soil before or immediately after planting to prevent weeds from pushing the material up. Fit around shrubs by making an X cut and laying the flaps back. Landscape fabric covered with an organic material gives good results, but weeds can begin to grow in the layer of decomposing mulch. A coarse textured mulch material, such as pine bark nuggets, will decay more slowly than fine-textured mulch. Note, although gravel, rock, black plastic, and rubber nuggets are used as mulches, replanting shrubs or removing these materials may be difficult. Rock materials and rubber nuggets will also absorb and re-radiate heat from the sun and thus increase water loss from plants and soil. Plastic mulch is not a good choice because it reduces the oxygen and water that reach the roots. This produces a very shallow root system and makes the plant more susceptible to drought stress. Watering plants. Watering is not as simple as waiting until a plant wilts or using some predetermined schedule. The need for water is influenced by a number of factors. Soils differ in how quickly they dry out after a rain or watering. A clay soil will not need watering as frequently as a sandy soil. Different plants have different water needs, and some are quite drought tolerant. Plants with large leaves, hydrangea, rhododendron, or with shallow root systems, azalea, dogwood, are usually the first to suffer during drought periods. Shrubs under large trees are especially susceptible because of the large volumes of water taken up by tree roots. Plants are more likely to suffer from drought during their first 2 growing seasons after transplanting. Trees and shrubs transplanted in late spring or summer are most susceptible to drought because their roots have a shorter time to become established before summer. When there is a long period without rain during the summer, new plants should be watered at least once a week. When to water. It is important to water thoroughly and to allow the soil to dry between waterings. Frequent, light watering wastes water, does little to satisfy the water requirements of most plants, and leads to development of a shallow root system, which increases susceptibility to drought. By allowing the soil surface to dry out somewhat between waterings, major root development will be at greater depths where soil moisture is higher. For well-established woody plants, watering should be done every 7 to 10 days during prolonged dry spells. During cool seasons, less frequent watering is needed because evaporation from the leaves and soil is slower. The best time to water is between 9 p.m. and 9 a.m. During this time there is generally less wind and temperatures are lower, so that less water is lost through evaporation. Irrigating during the evening after dew develops and before it dries in the morning does not increase disease development. Watering in late afternoon, however, lengthens the time the foliage is wet and can lead to disease development. Pruning trees and shrubs. Correct pruning may help stop the spread of such pests as the azalea stem borer, dogwood twig borer, and the dogwood clubgall midge. Pruning out and destroying the infested twigs in late spring or early summer helps control the next generation of these pests. Pruning out infected plant parts can help save apples, crabapples, and pears from fire blight. As these diseases grow downward from the twigs, the wood and the stem becomes discolored. The pruning cut must be below the downward spread of the disease. Dip the cutting blade in a disinfectant, 1 part chlorine bleach to 9 parts water, between each cut. Some plant diseases can be controlled by pinching off diseased parts such as flowers or leaves. When pruning to control the size or shape of trees and shrubs, where you make the pruning cut has a direct effect on plant health, prune a branch to just outside the branch collar, or swelling at the base of a branch where the bark from the branch and trunk meet. The collar contains protective chemicals that guard the tree trunk from decay causing microorganisms. When pruning cuts do not injure the branch collar, the wood heals all the way around. If you must prune tree branches larger than 2 inches in diameter, make a series of 3 cuts to avoid tearing the bark. Remember to make the 3rd cut just outside the branch collar. If a long stub is left, fungi begin to rot the stub, and the rot fungi can get into the trunk. Wounds treated with a dressing heal no faster than untreated wounds, and dressings may actually favor decay-causing microorganisms. Recognizing and preventing tree problems. Trees are usually the most valuable and prominent features in any landscape. It is very easy to damage a tree unintentionally. When you operate any equipment in a landscape or prepare a site for landscape installation, take every precaution to protect the existing trees. Prevent lawn mower and weed trimmer damage. Injury and infection started by a lawn mower or weed trimmer can seriously threaten a tree's health. The most severe injury occurs when the tree bark is loose in early spring, and again in early fall. The site of injury is usually the root buttress, because it flares out from the trunk and gets in the path of the mower or weed trimmer. Although large wounds are more serious, repeated small wounds can also add up to trouble. Use mulch around trees to prevent growth of weeds and grass. Otherwise remove weeds and grass by hand trimming or applying an appropriate herbicide. Exposed roots need protection from pedestrian and vehicle traffic, including lawn mowers. Mulching exposed roots protects them physically as well as preventing direct sunlight from heating them. Cutting off surface roots or covering them with topsoil is a temporary solution that can cause long-term damage to the tree. Root damage by trenching. Digging trenches for installation of water, sewer, telephone, cable, gas lines, or for building foundations can damage the root system of nearby trees. The likelihood that the tree will recover and survive depends on the percentage of the total root system damaged, the overall health of the tree, time of year, and the type and age of the tree. To minimize potential damage, locate trenches in areas that will cause the fewest roots to be damaged or near areas that have already been trenched. If such injury cannot be avoided, tree limbs can be thinned out to reduce demand for water from the remaining roots. Mulch, aerate the soil, and lightly fertilize to promote root growth. Test your knowledge. 1. Before installing a new plant in the landscape you should check A. The hardiness zone for which it is adapted. B. The amount of sunlight it requires. C. Soil drainage. D. All the above. Answer, D, all the above. 2. What is not a good way to work with poorly drained planting sites? A. Till and add compost or pine bark. B. Add extra fertilizer. C. Adjust planting depth to leave part of the root ball above the surface and cover with mulch. D. Install raised beds. Answer, B. Add extra fertilizer. 3. It is best to plant woody shrubs and trees A. in the fall. B. After they break dormancy in the spring. C. Below the soil surface to make watering easier. D. In holes that are the same diameter as the pot. Answer, A. In the fall. 4. When planting container-grown and balled and burlapped plants A, expose them to sunlight to harden the stems. B. Keep the potting mix they are growing in moist. C. Add nitrogen fertilizer to the planting hole. D. Knock the potting mix away from the roots. Answer, B. Keep the potting mix they are growing in moist. 5. Plants with fibrous root systems near the surface of the ground A, should never be planted near trees. B. Require more than 2 to 3 inches of mulch. C. Should be fertilized sparingly. D. Should be watered in late afternoon. Answer, C. Should be fertilized sparingly. 6. When pruning large branches A, leave a 6-inch stub. B. Cut as close to the trunk as possible. C. Make 3 cuts to avoid tearing the bark. D. Treat the wound with a dressing to reduce exposure to air. Answer, C. Make 3 cuts to avoid tearing the bark.